Hey, what's up, readers? I want to start by telling you a couple of quick stories. I don't want to put spots on that mushroom. That's poisonous. So the other day, I drove to Rockville, Maryland, which is about 30 minutes from my home. And I went to a Polish grocery store where I picked up a bunch of dried mushrooms. So that's my first statement. The other day, I drove for half an hour to Rockville, where I bought some dried mushrooms at a Polish grocery. That's the first thing I want to say. Second statement, yesterday I built a snow fort and a snowman outside. Why am I telling you this stuff? Because I would like to teach you about the skill of making inferences. Now, an inference is a conclusion that you can draw based on available evidence within a piece of writing. So let's start with the Rockville mushrooms thing. What can you assume about me and what I'm like as a person based on what I'm describing in this first sentence here? The other day, I drove for half an hour to Rockville. So on the basic level, number one, I'm old enough to drive. At least that's the logical answer. Maybe I'm underage and I don't have a driver's license and I'm a scofflaw. But the likelier answer is that I am old enough to have a driver's license and I have access to a car. I drove for half an hour to Rockville. So another assumption is that I do not live in Rockville, Maryland. But these are kind of our surface level assumptions. What can you tell about my interests or my motivations from this sentence? Why would a person buy dried mushrooms? An inference that you could make is that I like to cook. And why would I go to a specialty store, a Polish grocery, instead of just an ordinary supermarket? Well, maybe they're rare mushrooms. And I'm going to put a question mark there because I'm not sure. And part of making inferences is making reasonable assumptions, right? And depending on where you live, driving half an hour to go to a grocery store may or may not seem remarkable to you. But if you're going on a special quest just to get some Polish dried mushrooms, to me, that suggests that I'm pretty dedicated to or determined to acquire these mushrooms, that I went out of my way to acquire them. Let's do the same thing with the second statement. Okay, so yesterday I built a snow fort and a snowman outside. What's a reasonable conclusion that I can come up with based on that sentence? Well, a reasonable conclusion, since I'm outside, I'm building snowmen and snow forts, I can reasonably conclude that it's wintertime. It's cold out, I'm doing snow stuff. When does snow stuff happen? The wintertime. And what are some things that you could infer about me from the fact that I did this yesterday? Maybe it could be that I enjoy building things. I've written down David enjoys building things. So those are some inferences, and a key difference between an inference and a guess is that inferences are based in the text. So inferences are not guesses. When you're making inferences, you're basically behaving like a detective. Here's a detective dog, Sherlock Bones, the dog detective. I feel like Sherlock Holmes always has a pipe, so I'm going to give this dog a little bone to chew on as he sniffs the trail of these footprints, which are not exclamation points or rockets. They're footprints, or they're Arthur Murray dance instructions. Look it up. Anyway, if you or Sherlock Bones, the dog detective, are solving a mystery, you need to look at the available evidence. And when we look at texts, when we look at pieces of writing, and we're trying to make assumptions about those texts and about those passages in order to uncover their meaning. It's one thing to say, okay, based on my investigations with this little magnifying glass, I've determined that the suspect wears a size 8 shoe. But what else can we tell? What kind of traces of mud are there in the boot print? How heavy is the tread? How much does the suspect weigh? Can you tell if there's a manufacturer's mark in the tread of the shoe? Learning to make inferences is kind of a dance between what a sentence says and what it doesn't say. The stuff that is explicitly there, the stuff that is said out loud, and the stuff that is said quietly. The information that you need to read between the lines. So to go back to our mushrooms example, the sentence never explicitly says, I like to cook. It says, I bought some dried mushrooms at a Polish grocery. Maybe the case may be that I'm buying mushrooms for a friend who can't drive. There are other possibilities here. And that's why it's so important to root your inferences in the sentence itself, in the text itself, so that you can say, well, I figure this much is true. Here's what I can reasonably assume. And if you can do that, you have made an inference. You can learn anything. David out.